Okay, chapter 15, Wolves in the Water. The hot states of the soldiers pricked my back like arrows. I ached to wait for Bader, but the harsh words of the injured rider swirled within my ears as I galloped. Not to deliver the Khan's desire, and swiftly is death. Bayan was slowing, gathering her body to slide down a pebbly embankment, when a needle-sharp pain stung my thigh. An arrow, I thought. Someone is firing upon us. My hand felt for blood, found fur. Glancing down, I saw Bader clinging wild-eyed to my trouser leg, his back legs kicking the air. I yanked him by the scruff of his neck into my lap. One hand pressed upon him firmly as I bent over Bayan's neck and shouted for her very best. I prayed for her weak leg to hold strong. Only when we had put a great distance between ourselves and the Khan's soldiers did I rein the old mare to an easier pace. The two-beat trot felt slightly unsteady, and I noticed the white head bobbing with each stride. Not good signs. Worried, I pulled Bayan to a walk. As she caught her breath, my eyes searched the mountainous horizon for the guiding notch. There it was, a little east and south. I was back on the track to a horse both strong and swift. But it seemed that day that the gods decided to test my desire. Late in the morning, black clouds rolled in to dump bag after bag of hard rain upon our heads. Bayan had to pick her way carefully, for the steppe turned greasy with mud. Soon so much water floated upon the land that it seemed as if we walked on an endless lake. Lifting my head, I groaned. The notch in the mountains had disappeared. The storm swept past, but low clouds and a raw wind took its place. Cold, wet, and shivering, we hunched our shoulders and tried to follow a stream toward the mountains, though foaming brown waters spilled over its banks, blurring the true course. Bayan bravely splashed through the floodwaters, steadily plunging ahead. When at last brilliant sun blinked between fleeing clouds, it shone upon towering mountains that seemed to have risen up suddenly right before our faces. Bayan halted and stamped a hoof impatiently. Which way? Sagging in the saddle, drenched to the bone, I tiredly looked around. The mountains rose so closely that I could not see to their tops. Water flowed everywhere. We were hopelessly lost. The soldiers had been right, I thought. Bad luck had been riding with them. By casting me out, they had unknowingly freed themselves. But it seemed that bad luck would always ride with me, clamped to my side forever and always. Or would it? Pushing numb fingers inside my soggy dell, I found the gold ornament and lifted it to my palm. Closing my eyes and wishing very hard to be led to the arrow station, I prodded Bayan's sides. She stepped uncertainly at first, then abruptly leaned forward, lunging headlong into a loud, splashing, ground-covering gallop. I opened my eyes and screamed. Loping at my left heel, red tongue flopping, was a wolf. The journey was over. We were dead. Squeezing shut my eyes, I waited for the sharp fanged leap, but it never came. Squinting through half-parted lids, I looked again. Now there were 3 wolves, and another was splashing across the steppe. Yet the yellow-eyed creatures didn't turn upon us, and Bayan seemed to be running with them rather than from them. Suddenly I remembered the silvery wolf that had crossed our path on the way to Karakoram, bringing luck to our journey. Were these wolves bringing luck now? Were these hunters actually guiding us? The floodwaters shimmered a fiery orange as the sun began sinking. We galloped into a stand of tall trees, and Bayan's hoofbeats became muffled by mud and fallen leaves. Oddly, I thought I heard music far ahead. I reined her to a walk to listen. For some reason, Bader chose that moment to scramble from my dell and jump to the ground. When I looked down, both Bader and the wolves were gone. Where did the wolves go? I don't know. To smoke in the air, a shadow beneath a tree? What was the music? Smiling, the old woman rested against the stable wall and sighed. The mooring corps, she said, the horse harmony. I don't believe you have this instrument in your country. But then you couldn't, for it was born of our people's love of the horse. It is told that long, long ago, a nobleman had a favorite horse that died. So heartbroken was he that he pulled hairs from his horse's tail for the strings and a bow, and for a bow. And from the very best wood he fashioned the mooring corps. Okay, I should have looked up. That's an italicized what that is. The mooring corps is a 2-stringed violin-like instrument with a carved horse head in the place of the scroll, played with a bow made of horsehair and wood. When this nobleman drew the bow across the strings, he heard in their music the tremulous whinnies of his horse. He recognized the burbling of the many streams that had splashed through and the humming of the winds that had shared their travels. In this way, he would always remember his finest friend. The round-sided mare, restlessly circling the stall again, paused to swing her head up and down and nicker empathetically, bringing smiles to the 2 humans in the corner. The girl asked another question. Where was the music coming from? From the arrow station. The wolves had led us there. It was headed by a woman as strange as she was large, a woman who, I believe, both loved me and hated me. And that is the end of chapter 15. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to go on to 16. I didn't realize that. The fast woman with the fast horses. She was the fattest woman I had ever seen, the one who pushed her head through the door flap long into the afternoon. I met her raised eyebrows with a teeth-chattering greeting. "Sign Banu," I said. "How do you do?" My, she stammered. As her bulk filled the entrance, she clucked her tongue in the same way my mother had. "I did not hear your bells, young man. You and your horse tippy-toed up to my door, quiet as a couple of foxes." Her mountainous shoulders scraped the narrow doorframe, and for a moment I feared she might step forward, carrying the whole station upon her back. But, grunting like an ox, she managed to shift her weight around, lift her chin from soft necklaces of fat, and call, "Delger, an arrow rider, bring round the bay." Waves of silk stained a ripe berry color rustled with her turning. I noticed the fine embroidery and wondered how many days it had taken some poor, hunched-over girl to stitch all that material. Pale coral earrings carved in an open-work design and much too fine for everyday wear brushed the woman's sloping shoulders. Just as my eyes were traveling down to the brightly sewn coverings worn on her feet that, surprisingly, were little bigger than mine, she turned back to me. I hid my interest in her elaborate attire and, untying the heavy gold medallion engraved with writing from my waist, leaned over to hand it to her. I watched the plump eyelids flutter upward in amazement. A messenger of the Khan himself! Her lips tasted the words with obvious pleasure. Then the small brown eyes shot back to me, and I ducked my chin within its surrounding collar, hoping to protect my identity. She thought she had embarrassed me. "Forgive me, young man." The woman was swaying from foot to foot like an overgrown girl and grinning. "Understand you are a surprise to us. The Khan's arrow riders rarely ride out this far. Mostly, we just see herdsmen riding for a shaman or soldiers sending for supplies or two tribes announcing a marriage." At that moment, a broad-chested boy led a red bay horse, bridled and saddled, around the corner. Bayan nickered, and the bay answered. Without pause, the woman continued. "And a marriage announcement is just the message I'd like to receive. Yes, Delger?" The boy rolled his eyes. Handing his mother the reins, he silently turned to check the saddle's fastenings. Chuckling, the woman swatted her son's back with a bear-like paw. Then she returned the medallion to me and began giving directions to the next arrow station. "Now," she said, "notice that path over there beside the stream? Follow it through the thicket and up the mountain until you see here." She was slapping the reins against my thigh. "Hop off. The Khan's things must not be delayed, and while this bay may look small, he'll carry you swift as a river and just as smooth as if you floated on it. Now, when you get to the clearing—" My eyes no longer followed her directions, for I suddenly understood that she wanted me to leave Bayan and ride on with her horse. Panic-stricken, with my pounding heart drowning out her words, I watched the woman waggle a finger in the direction of the thicket. "No," I thought, "I can't leave Bayan. No." "No," the woman said abruptly, clapping her hands together. "Although the gold piazza of the Khan shines like the sun, it can't light the darkness now, can it?" Piazza is a passport. Oh, like that's the passport that they gave her that had the information about what she needed to do for Khan. Turning, she began impatiently slapping the reins against her son's arm. Still without speaking, he took them and shouldered the bay aside. "You rest here tonight, young man," the woman ordered. Tipping her weight precariously forward, she squinted. Eyes hunkering behind folds of flesh examined Bayan's legs. "By the looks of your mare, she could use a rest as well. A bit old for such a hard riding, isn't she?" The woman, breathing heavily, twisted her head up toward me. "Has the Khan fallen on such hard times that he employs the likes of her for his fastest?" Beads of sweat popped out upon her forehead as she straightened. Labored panting nearly choked her chuckles. "You tell the Khan when you get back to him to come see me, Genma. Tell him I have the finest, fastest horses in all of his lands. Tell him," she said, winking, "that I will back any of my horses in a race against any of his." She clapped her hands again. The sharp noise jumped into the long shadows, disappearing into the depths of the forest. A cold wind lunged out to bite at my back. And suddenly I wanted nothing more than to step out of my saddle and sit beside a cheery fire with friendly people, and to listen to tales of fast horses. "Now come," she was saying, slapping my knee. "Step down. Your mare will be well tended by my son. Do you like marmot? I have 2 fat ones cooking in a pot on the fire right now, and as fast as my horses are, even better in my cooking." "Ha!" She laughed, slapping my knee again for emphasis. Step down. What do they call you?" My mind galloped. "Arun," I mumbled in a deep voice. Stiffly I dismounted, fiery pain shooting through my legs as my numbed feet hit the frozen ground. My breath caught in my throat. I doubled over. Reaching to brace myself against Bayan, my hand fell against air, for she was already being led away. Wobbling, I paused to catch my breath. I could see Genma squinting again, but as before, her suspicious look was barely a ripple in her chatter. "And I have the 2 most beautiful daughters. You must meet them. There is Otgon. She has 8 summers and can milk my mares faster than even her sister. That is Davarsuren. Now she has seen 10 summers, but already she is preparing the meals with me, and the man who takes her for his wife will grow as fat as I am. Ha!" Genma clasped her round belly. 10 summers is still young, I think, for marriage, but in another year or 2, perhaps. She let her voice trail off. Delger, she called, unsaddle them both and turn them out, and give them that mare a handful of the good grain. But watch, no more than a handful, it's too dear. Then slapping me on the back, sending me stumbling toward the door, she said, Come on, Arun, I'll wager you have some stories for us, and some new stories to us will be as good as grain to your mare. Let's begin with your message. I will make a guess, she said, closing her eyes briefly, that you are carrying it within a sealed leather pouch tied around your waist underneath your dell. She opened her eyes. Am I right? I nodded. Do you know what it says? I shook my head. Do you know what's inside the 2 bags you carry? I shook my head again. While Gemma began a long list of speculation, I found myself held fast, almost cringing, just inside the first square room I had ever entered. You see, when I looked up and saw the giant trunks of trees stretching close over my head, I feared they would fall and crush me. But another powerful shove from Gemma pushed me, stumbling again, right underneath them into the center of the room. Looking around wide-eyed, I saw that the walls, too, were stacks of tree trunks stuck together with dried mud. Sheets of wool felt stirring slightly in the drafts hung on each wall. Sheets of wool felt stirring slightly in the drafts hung on each wall. Two girls knelt beside the cooking fire, one stirring a broth bubbling in a footed bronze pot, while the other pulled needle and thread through a dell the color of dried grass. Heads bent together, smiles flashing wide in the firelight, they whispered gaily, bursting forth in the high, tinkling laughter of brass bells. Although I knew I was the source of their amusement, a part of me longed to throw off my heavy coverings and kneel, giggling beside them, but I remained behind my mask. In the far left corner of the room knelt a boy scraping an ox hide with an energetic yet haphazard strokes. There was something odd about him. Already he was fat, like his mother, and from his profile he looked to be about my age, but he didn't even look up when I fell stumbling into the room. While Gemma busied herself pulling bowls from a tall table cabinet, I continued gazing, open-mouthed, at my surroundings. Beds ringed the room, their iron feet sinking into thick sherdicks. Okay, so a sherdick is a wool floor mat of the Gare. So woven in colorful patterns of birds and flowers. At the foot of each bed rested a stocky wooden chest, festooned with designs of cranes and sheep and horses and leaves. The one nearest the 2 girls yawned open, revealing piles of richly dyed clothing. Near Genma, atop another large painted chest, slumped several dolls. I shuddered once, remembering the dirty-faced doll in my own gear. At the door hung a large goatskin bag foaming with the familiar A-Rog, and propped against the left wall were 3 of the most handsome saddles I had ever seen. Above them hung 4 or 5 fancy bridles and several tasseled breast collars and cruppers. I longed to trace my fingers across the beautiful craftsmanship, but at that moment Genma swayed around, silky Dell rustling, and clapped her hands. Arun, she said, we ate already. Since my husband is my, she interrupted herself. I have not introduced you to my daughters. Arun, this is my first daughter, Davasurin, and this is her sister, Otgan. Each of the girls shyly nodded in turn. Genma did not introduce the boy in the corner. She went on. Arun, since my husband is away, he is riding with the soldiers. You will have the seat of honor. She pointed to a fringed cushion behind the cooking fire, the seat facing the door and the one traditionally awarded to a guest. Nodding, I took a step toward the cushion, but while my one leg was already tingling with newfound warmth, my crippled foot and ankle still throbbed painfully, so that I lurched forward like a still wet ox calf. The sisters shared whispers again, but this time their laughter was cut short by the stern hushing of their mother. Just as I collapsed, red-faced, on the cushion, Delger came in and silently sat cross-legged on my right side. Steam rising from the cooking pot polished Genma's face as she began ladling the marmot stew into gleaming bluish-white bowls. Now, I had never before seen porcelain. When a bowl was placed in my cupped hands, I yelped and juggled and bobbled the fire-hot piece into my lap. Quick as a dog, I set to licking my burnt flesh. Genma glanced sidelong at me, her fat lips curled in a little smile as she continued filling bowls for Delger and her 2 daughters. I watched them slip their hands back inside their sleeves and expertly grab the hot bowl with their padded comfort of their dells. Finally, Genma laded a bowl full for herself and then, dragging a bright orange stool with 4 sturdy legs to a fire, lowered her weight onto it. When I noticed that all faces were turned toward me, expectant, I took a sip of the stew. Genma's boast of good cooking flew straight as an arrow. My heart quickened with the thought that her boast of fast horses might fly just as true. Delger and the 2 girls lifted their bowls and began to suck noisily. That is, until a tisk-tisking noise from their mother, along with a raised eyebrow, made the older girl set her bowl aside, pick up yet another bowl, this one wooden, and ladle a half portion into it. Wrinkling her nose, she rose and carried it to her brother in the corner. I watched her place his chubby hands around the rim. She spoke a word to him, then returned to the fire and her own bowl. The wind whistling through the cracks in the walls delivered a shrill whinny. I recognized it as Bayon's, and a pang of worry for her safety and for Bader's, if he even was alive, stabbed my stomach. Looking from face to face, each one buried in the steam of a cup bowl, I wondered about my own safety. Although my place near the fire was hot, I kept my father's hat pulled low on my head, trying to ignore the sweat dampening my hair to my cheeks. It was then that I saw, in the nervous glances of the others, that these people were equally uncertain of me. From beneath the creaking orange stool scurried a long-legged spider headed across the sheer deck, which is the rugs in the gear. Jenma stamped her trunk of a leg upon it. "Tell us about yourself, Arun," she commanded. "Of what clan are you?" I swallowed. "Karite," I said under my breath. "Karite? Then you live west of here. You ride a long way from home. Are there many in your family?" I shook my head. "Do you have a wife?" I shook my head again, sipping the broth and plopping back lumps of marmot meat into my mouth. I tried to look shy, which wasn't difficult, but Jenma, like all people living far from their kind, had endless questions. "Tell us, Arun, how did you come to serve Kubla Khan?" She casually swirled the broth within her bowl, watching the liquid with one eye, me with the other. I busied myself with chewing a fatty chunk of meat and then raised the bowl to my lips for a long sip. "We don't see too many of the Khan's arrow riders out this way," Jenma went on, "but I have seen a few in my years." She squinted at me again, the way a cat ponders how close to sneak upon a mouse without sending it running. "Now, the ones I've seen dress differently from you," she was saying, "so I'm wondering why you're different." She smiled. I lowered the empty bowl, wiped my mouth with my sleeve. I felt my face grow very hot. I was cornered. "I was riding east of..." My words unexpectedly widened into a long yawn. "Ha!" The woman laughed, slapping her knee. "The lid fits the pot, doesn't it? Go for moon after moon waiting for news, and just when it walks in the door, I worry it to a yawn with my questions. Please forgive me once again, Arun. If you are finished," and a loud belch punctuated Jenma's heaving her weight to her feet, "I'll take your bowl and you can take that bed in the corner." A flick of wrist and thumb indicated a small bed next to where the odd boy sat. "There's an extra blanket folded underneath if you get cold. I'll wake you at first light so you may be on your way." Nodding appreciatively and feigning another long yawn, I gave my bowl one last lick, then rose and limped toward the bed. "May Tangri watch over your sleep," Jenma called. I fell upon the bed with a sigh that floated around the room. The dead could be no more tired, I thought, as I turned my back to the fire and pulled a heavy woven blanket across it. But my shoulders hunched instinctively at the loud whispering that erupted behind them, and I began to worry again. I was fairly certain that Jenma suspected my identity as an arrow rider, which posed two problems. If she discovered I was a girl, she would undoubtedly take the Peza from me and keep me from riding south. Yet if she did believe I was the Khan's messenger, she would make me continue riding in the morning on a fresh horse, leaving Bayan behind. Somehow I had to find a way to keep both the Piazza and Bayan and still deliver the Khan's valuables, swiftly. I sighed once more. How could I possibly ride Bayan so soon? I knew I had pushed her too hard. What if her leg was beyond healing? And what about Bador? What happened to him? I heard Jenma ask Delgar to play the Morincower. As he drew out the first hesitant notes, I began forming a plan. Long before dawn, I decided I would sneak out of the station and place my saddle upon one of Jenma's horses. I would quickly look around for Bador and then lead Bayan as fast as she could travel, hoping that without the weight of a rider, she would be able to make it. If she couldn't, I hoped to leave her in the temporary care of another clan. Then I would carry the Khan's bags of treasures southward to the next station and the next. In my grand plans that night, I even hoped that Kubla Khan would be so pleased by my prompt delivery that he would reward me with one of his swift horses. Already I could see myself returning to my ale with both Bayan and a beautiful new horse to win the long race. Then I would breed it and raise more swift horses, and every year after it would be one of my horses that won the long race. Delgar continued coaxing a melody from the strings, the liquid notes fingering up my back and neck, then plunging warm to the pit of my stomach. I rolled over to watch him. He knelt, eyes closed, leaning almost affectionately into the horse-headed instrument. Utgan and Davasuran nestled close to their mother, enveloped in her great arms. And then I noticed the younger son. He was still seated in the corner, legs crossed, just at the foot of my bed. Large, dark eyes, kind ones like those of a cow, stared unblinkingly into the wall. He was rocking back and forth with the music. I noticed that his wooden bowl of marmot stew sat still uneaten in his lap, and then I saw why. With both hands, he could clutch the bowl's rim, but as he lifted it, shake it to his lips, an unexpected twitch in one or both arms would nearly upend it. On his smooth, chubby face, I saw the raw emotions, the hunger to eat, the fear of dirtying himself, the pain of being different. Oh, how I recognized that pain, and I couldn't help myself. Aware that all faces turned toward me, I slipped out of my bed and knelt beside the boy. I placed my hands over his. Looking into his eyes and nodding reassuringly, I helped him guide the bowl to his lips. He slurped hungrily. As we lowered the bowl together, he smiled. I smiled back, and we lifted the bowl again. Crouching in the corner's shadow then, knee to knee, we both listened, swaying to the music, and each pull of the bow across the strings was a hard tug at my heart. In the Morincower's haunting melodies, I heard the trilling nicker of Bayan's greeting. Upon its music, I was carried back to the wind-swept hill where I used to sit beside her all afternoon. I smelled the warm dust of her coat, the sage-scented breezes fingering her white mane, my long black hair. I remember with that sweet yet bitter taste how it was to feel like the only two creatures in the world. Delgar began to hum a tune, his voice deep and smooth and soothing. I began to look upon him with new eyes. I admired the roundness of his head, black hair cropped short. My eyes noticed his furrowed brow, lingered upon his full lips pressed thoughtfully together. Then he began to sing. It was a song about a man who had 2 golden horses with manes of silver. One dark night, this man's enemy crept up to the herd and stole the 2 horses. A long time passed, and somehow only one golden horse managed to return to its owner. But only this one horse. The man was very sad, but the horse was sadder. The night's cold was pressing upon the room now, and since the boy had long since finished his meal, I eased his head from my shoulder and crawled into bed. I listened to a few more songs, letting them fly me to the mountaintops or gallop alongside princesses, and soon they carried me off to sleep. And that was chapters 15 and 16. So in Oyuna's culture, wolves are considered good or evil, and it looks like both. While they can kill and dangerous, to see one brings good luck. And why is Oyuna and easy at the arrow station? It was the first square building she has been in and is filled with unfamiliar things. She worries that, so she's only ever been in houses, right? In the gears, not in a square building. She worries that the nosy hostess will try to keep her horse. She is unsure of how much of her story to tell, plus she is pretending to be a boy. So those are all some reasons from there for chapters 15 and 16 of I Rode a Horse of Milk White Jade.